the system is set up against us. I think when we walk into the hospital, we're walking into an institutionalized system with a whole bunch of people who basically want us to just shut up and let them do what they are taught to do because they know better. And that is a huge problem.
Welcome to The Discerning Mother, the podcast for Jesus-loving moms who want to tune out the noise and tune into God's design for motherhood. I'm Bridget Tibaldi, a board-certified women's health coach, holistic health practitioner, birth nerd, and homeschooling mom of 5. I help moms to heal their minds and bodies, trust their instincts, and embrace the beauty of the way God created them. Here we talk about birth, hormones, motherhood, faith, and anything else. Let's go. Welcome back to the Discerning Mother podcast. This is Bridget, and I am here with Jennifer, and I am really excited to chat about her book. She actually sent it to me, and it's so good, and I'm going to link it in the show notes because I feel like everybody should read it. And it's so relevant. We were just chatting about this before. It's so relevant, even though it was written in 2004. And so welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah, and can you, before we dive into the book and like chatting more about your story, can you give us a little bit of information about you and who you are?
Yeah. Okay. So first off, for being relevant to this new podcast, I have 2 children. They're grown. One is 27. The other is 23. They are pretty much launched. One just graduated from college and she's starting a life in Chicago. And my son is a accountant in a public accounting firm, but he's discerning priesthood right now.
Oh,
so he decided
amazing.
that it's going to take 8 years, right? Professionally, I run a school called the Blackbird Studio for Writers. I help adult learners learn how to tell their stories, either memoir or through novel. Creative writing is basically what I'm doing for adult learners. And I've developed that over 10 years. I have a very specific method to help people very practically get through a published and through the point of a great written book to a published book. And I have probably 60 students. And then I'm also on Substack where I have something called Flight School, which is a landing perch for people just getting to know me. When you want to work with a writing teacher, it's a lot like finding a therapist or a good priest. You want somebody who can really be your advocate and be well read and do a good job for you. So that's a place where people flirt with me a little bit to make sure that I might be the right mentor for them. And I've been writing professionally since I was in high school, making money as a journalist, and then eventually started my own PR firm. And then I wrote my own books, and now I'm a writing teacher. So I've had a few lives of evolution as a writing teacher.
Nice. Yeah. So I can't wait to dive even further into your whole story. But where are you in the world?
I live on the Oregon coast, way on the far edge of the Oregon coast, kind of central Oregon, in a little fishing hamlet called Pacific City. And this is where most of the commercial fishermen launch their dory boats off the beach and go out and fish.
So cool.
Big fish and crab. And then we also have a river, and they do a lot of the incoming salmon.
Nice. Oh, it's so cool. All right. So we got connected through another podcast that we were both on. And so I just really appreciate you sending me your book. Again, I know you guys can't see this. You can hear Hugo. It's called Show Me the Way, the one that you sent me. And I just find it to be like so easy to read. And it's an autobiography, but not in like the normal autobiography way. It was like reading a fictional story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's your story, but it's in such an easy way to digest. And like, I flew through this book because it's just so easy to read. And I have like a whole page of notes to go over. But I guess one thing to start is like, why did you feel compelled or called to reach out to me about this?
Well, I listened to you talk on the podcast Known with Isaac.
Yeah.
And the way we're talking about being a mom and the struggles that mothers go through navigating the medical system and trusting intuition, plus the inner working of faith, all of it together sounded exactly like me, only I didn't have a faith at that time. I had left Catholicism and was wandering in the desert of my confusion. but just listening to how things really hadn't changed, and the idea that your birth experience was being micromanaged, it just infuriated me all over again. I was like, yes, that's what happens. And we lose at some level our trust in ourselves and our sense of what is right for our bodies and our babies. And again, I was just like, sister, I know you and I am so sorry. And I'm going to share this book with you because, well, maybe it won't be relevant anymore, but it seemed very relevant to what the new mother is going through. And I wrote this book really from my heart because, well, the publisher had asked me to do something interesting after I published two other books, one called Blackbird and the other called Still Waters, which were kind of the two parts of a harrowing childhood story. And this book was, well, do something else, the publisher said. So I wanted to write something that was very immediate and close to my heart, which was, how does one parent from that kind of intense childhood, their own childhood? And as you can see, I'm just really in it. I'm really actively parenting and then writing about parenting. And I'm struggling, just like all new mothers like you with a baby at your breast right now. You're struggling, you're in it. It's so physical and it's so intense. And I just wanted to capture all of the physicality and the intensity and kind of my confusion and some of my fury at the way the system was working. So yeah, I just thought, oh, Bridget, I want you to read this. It would be better than having a conversation because you could kind of feel that this is a timeless question, especially in the age of science and the age of over deifying the medical establishment, right? Aside from our ability, not that the medical establishment doesn't do great things, but there's not a lot of room for our humanity often. And that is so crucial for us to hold to our humanity and fight for ourselves and what we want to do, as you saw me do with the birth of my first son, right? I was like, I'm going to fight my way through this. So that's why I reached out to you. I just thought I just want to thank you for your honesty in that podcast, but also to share something of myself.
Yeah, no, I loved it so much. And, like you said, the over deicizing of the medical model, because again, it is so needed and like God has given that to us for a reason, but it's just, we make it like our God almost, like a God, where it's like, you're like, yes, we will do whatever you tell us to do, instead of realizing that like, no, it's a service. And, that these doctors and nurses and everybody in it are here to serve us, which is why they should be getting well compensated. But unfortunately, sometimes they don't. But what I loved about the book is that it opened up, and one of the things I loved is that it opened up in such a relatable way. At least I know for me and some of the women that I've talked to, when like your waters broke at the beginning, I'm not going to give it away too much. And you were saying like, baby, like move, baby, please move. I can't tell you how many times I've done that throughout the pregnancy where I'm like, wait, I haven't felt the baby move today. And just because I was up doing stuff and like, didn't even think about movement. And then in those moments of panic where it's like, is everything okay? Like, that's just so relatable on so many different levels.
Move, just move.
I know. And then the other thing that it opened up with that I thought was so funny is how your husband, Steve, you said to call the doctor and ask like one specific thing. And then you were frustrated that he did ask that one specific thing, but that he didn't ask any other clarifying questions. And I just thought that was so funny because it's like, how many times have we asked a husband to do something and they do that thing, but then they don't think to do the next thing. And it was just so funny.
Why can't you read my mind?
I know, right?
Why can't you know the terror that's going on with me now that I have to turn my body and our child's body over to this unknown beast, as you say, that takes control. They are providing us a service, but they act as if they're doing a service to us, and that we're lucky to be in their place. And whether the doctors are being compensated or not, I know it cost me $12,000 to have a perfectly healthy child. So somebody's making a ton of money, and they're doing it in a very tight time frame, as you read from the story. Like the pressure to have that baby under that time frame was all about the industry and not about me, and certainly not about my baby at all. And it was a war, and it's a terrible time to be at war, to be pregnant. You don't want to be at war. You want to be focused on doing the job God set you to do, which is bring up life into this world, right? But I felt like I was completely dissipated unnecessarily. And I hope that you can convey that to women, to remember to hold their ground. But the fear just becomes so great. And the trust, you want to trust.
Yeah.
You want to believe they know what they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that you did have a birth plan, and I know so many women who come in to the who go into the hospital with these like pretty birth plans, saying like, I want delayed cord clamping, I want the golden hour. Like it's like these wonderful, beautiful things that should be standard is what they want. But like in your case, they basically like just set it on the counter and didn't do anything with it.
Right away. And
so then you also had like no informed consent about antibiotics or anything like that. So how did, like, can you tell, without giving away like the whole story, because I do want people to get your book, but like, how did that first birth experience go between like the no informed consent, throwing out the birth plan, like you said, like them telling you what to do, everything that you were going through? How did it go? And like, just tell us, a little bit more about that.
Well, it was a war from the beginning to the end. My baby was 6 weeks early, and they had, you can only look back and think, I should have done this. I should have said that. I should have tried this. But at the time, you don't know. You're just working on your own native wit, right? And your own capacity at that moment. But the baby was 6 weeks early. So now everything is changed because it's about a premature baby, and they want you to keep that baby in there as long as possible. And I didn't have enough experience to understand that the amniotic fluid does reproduce itself. So I'm under the impression that there's nothing in there for that baby to sustain himself or be with, and he has to get out. And that actually wasn't true. The baby could be fine and in there for quite some time. And then they're also telling me, well, it could be an infection that broke the water. But actually, it turned out that the baby was a twin, and there were 2 bags. And so one of the babies had been reabsorbed, but the bag hadn't. And so the reason that the waters broke was because of the 2 bags, which they didn't see until the baby was born. But by that point, they'd already pumped me full of so many antibiotics and so many other get-going drugs to make me have the baby that, all that was moot. They didn't need to do that at all. And so I intuitively knew he was fine. But because he's premature and because this is my first baby, I'm trusting them while fighting for what I also believe. And I'm also fighting against my husband, who trusts them. He just wants it to be done. He doesn't necessarily want to hear my excuses. As you can see in the story, I'm like, no, this is what I know. This is what I feel. This is what's going on. And so I'm fighting him, and I'm fighting the establishment. And it's just a really rugged battle for me every step of the way. And maybe God did that to create the boy who's become a priest. Because not only was he born premature, but because of their overly aggressive methods, they ended up doing serious damage to his optical nerves. And he couldn't see right for 9 years. And that became yet another battle, because I had to figure out what was wrong with him. Why was he hitting his head? Why was he so frustrated with hand-eye coordination? Why was he having these explosive rages? Well, it's because the child couldn't see. And that happened to be from the very aggressive way that they handled him after he was born, taking him from me, taking him to the ER or to the, the ICU, and then putting a catheter in his head and all this other stuff that they do. That's just part of their protocol for premature babies. And so it was just one disaster after another in the case of the first child. Because again, I'm fighting the system and I'm fighting my husband, and I'm trying to ground myself in my own intuition of what I know is true about my child and be heard. So even if I, like Cassandra, I don't know if you're familiar with the Trojan War, like Cassandra was she had the gift of prophecy, but it was taken from her by Neptune or whoever, and because she wouldn't fall in love with him. And so I think we're all Cassandras in that we have, especially when we're pregnant, we're connected to life and God and everything bigger than ourselves. We have this profound intuition, but we're not heard because we can't prove it. And if we don't have a partner or a midwife or somebody on our side that's like, I'm going to go with mom versus I'm going to go with the odds being that something will be wrong, right? Then, or that dialogue can't even be worked out, then it's going to be a war. I don't know how it can't be. And so I'm kind of getting off track, but I want to make sure and circle around the way that it was from the moment I crossed the threshold of the hospital was a battle. It was a battle against my intuition and their process and system and protocol. This is how you treat every single person who walks in the door. We treat them all the same. They're cookie cutters. And this is what the insurance guidelines are. And my husband is on their side. So the whole time I'm just fighting and fighting and fighting. And it was so hard because I knew I was right most of the time. And it turned out I was. And that became even more painful because being right didn't prevent the suffering, and it didn't keep my son from suffering even further. Like, one of the things I said near the very end to my husband was, don't leave him. Stay with them. They insisted on taking him away from me. And you know how important that first hour of bonding is. It's just so crucial. And to just allow that whole absorption. But they insisted on taking him away, even though he had a 9 and a 10 APCAR score, which is insane. Why would you take this baby away? Well, we got to do it. That's the protocol. That's the rule. And I said to my husband, don't leave him. Don't leave his side. Hold his hand the whole time. Stay with him. Talk to him. He knows your voice. And they shoved him out of the room. And he ended up sitting in the hall crying. Aww. And I was like, okay, this is about as helpful as a headache. You know, I can't get up and go get to him because I'm spread out all over the table being sewn up. And the 2 bags of water are coming out. And it was just like, this is wrong. This whole system is just wrong. It stinks.
I mean, yeah, you take a perfectly healthy woman into a place that cures sick people and people who have things broken with themselves.
Yeah, it's a place where people die.
Yeah. And so this is something that a lot of my clients want to work on, and I think women in general need to do this, where trusting your instincts. So, and this is so important in regards to birth and motherhood, but just being a woman, being a person in general. Mm-hmm. So how do you know, like, how did you know, or how do you know, what are your instincts and like what is the Holy Spirit whispering to you versus, I don't know, pride or just like stubbornness? Like, how do you differentiate the two?
Yeah, well, these are really good questions. Everybody has to answer themselves. I mean, as you know, I wasn't a faithful woman at this time. I was born Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I went through confirmation, but I left the church in my 20s after just a rugged childhood with a Catholic family. It was pretty abusive. And so I just couldn't reconcile the church with that childhood. And I left. So I was really kind of a street smart person. And I think people who have lived intense experiences in the past where survival is very much always on the fore of their existence, I think we develop a kind of knowledge about what's practically right and what's practically wrong. Street smart people just have street smarts. That's why they call them street smarts. And they know when they're being messed with. And so I don't think it was as much intuitive. Well, it was intuitive, but it was intuitive based on logic. Like, I could actually say what you're saying isn't logically accurate, right? But they would say, well, we have to be safe. So it's funny to be, a torpedo coming out of your belly. you're this kind of wobbly creature. You look like one of those weebles that wobble and won't fall down, right? You're this very odd looking creature with a baby in your body, and you're kind of demanding evidence at some level for what is being pushed at you, right? And you're being disregarded as, oh, you're just a pregnant one, you don't know what you're talking about. So I think right there is where we have the big problem. The mother should lead. She's kind of the president of this whole situation. The mother has the baby in her body. So I never felt it was about pride. It was about, I just know. I know my body. I know, like, one of the things they said is you could have an infection. And I argue with Steve. He's like, well, you need to just have the antibiotics because that's their protocol. That's what the doctor said. The doctor got woken up at 3 a.m. and just says, do whatever, you do. I said, I just had a test. I was just tested. I just was tested, in the doctor's office like 2 or 3 days ago. I don't have an infection. So but you can't prove I don't have an infection, right? But I'm like, but I have evidence that I don't. I don't know that that's pride or just practicality. I don't 100% know. As I'm grappling with your question, I think the system is set up against us. I think when we walk into the hospital, we're walking into an institutionalized system with a whole bunch of people who would basically want us to just shut up and let them do what they are taught to do because they know better. And that is a huge problem. And women are going to, I think, continually struggle with what you and I are talking about right now until something fundamentally changes. I personally wanted to have a baby at home. And my husband was like, no, are you insane? Like, in his mind, the only way a baby could possibly be born is in a hospital. And as we're taught, we defer to our husbands. Even though I wasn't a Christian woman, he's the head of household. So my mistakes start with the guy. In many ways, I love him, but he doesn't think like I do. He's not holistic. He's not willing to take risks. I mean, he felt it was risky. And yet later he said, wow, we should have had that baby at home for what ended up happening to our child.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of women that I work with struggle with is they really want the home birth or even the birth center birth, but their husband does not feel comfortable with it. So, like you said, like being good Christian wives, we defer to the husband. When in reality, in this situation with pregnancy, men don't really know anything. And even if it's your first baby, like women really don't know that much nowadays anyway. But we have something in us that makes it so that we know what is happening. And like you said, like you just know your body. Even if you're not super in tune with it, like you don't check in every once in a while with yourself, like there is something about pregnancy that really makes your brain switch and you kind of become like hyper focused on things. Like, oh, is this too much bleeding? Is this too much swelling? Is this too much? Is this too little? Like, da 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 da. Like, you just kind of really think about everything that's going on within your body and like what you're putting in it and everything like that. And so, this is an interesting point of like, husbands are typically on the side of the medical model, which makes sense because they want to protect you. And we've sort of been conditioned that the hospital is this like savior protection place. But in reality, the men should really be deferring to what it is that their wife feels comfortable with. Because ultimately, if a wife doesn't feel comfortable going into a hospital to have a baby, it's not going to go well. If a wife feels comfortable staying at home and having the baby, it's going to go a lot more smoothly because she feels comfortable. And that's something that is really interesting to think about.
It's a tough one.
It is.
Because, I mean, I was set up to fail in many ways because I already had a very negative idea of hospitals. Both my parents had died accidentally in hospitals as a result of doctor neglect. doctor's mistake. My mother was 34. She had her lung punctured for pneumonia, and she died of respiratory arrest. She was 34. My father, at 39, had a heart attack, and he was extubated. Too quickly, it forced another heart attack, it brought another heart attack, and he died on the table. She was 34, he was 39, so I had a very strong aversion to hospitals after that, because if this is what's going to happen to a 34 and a 39-year-old, what's going to happen with me when I walk in there with my precious and beloved child, the first and most important person I'll get to meet since I've lost my entire family. So I was really high, like you were saying, my attention to my body, my awareness of everything, every pulse, every heartbeat, every hiccup, I was all up over it. And it was not a good idea for me to be in a hospital. It was not a good idea, actually, for me to defer to my husband in that case. What I needed to do was educate him and bring him along to calm his fears down in order that he trust that I know the place that's going to make me feel secure and safe. And I never felt that in the hospital, not at all. And yet I cagily made my way through, and I was able to have that baby. But it was not good. And what I could just say to women, have a very good relationship with your partner where you can talk all of this out way before go time, because go time often comes early in unexpected ways. And yes, you may even have to go to the hospital, but have a team. Yeah. Have someone who can advocate, because you're not going to be the best advocate for yourself. They're pretty much interested in you being flat on your back, right? And just drugged up with everything that they can put you on. So if you have a mom or a midwife, or a mom and a midwife, a team of strong women who are like, hell no, or make this make sense to me, then the husband doesn't have to hold all the protective energy. Yeah. And a lot of women, sadly, we're raised in a culture where we all have to be little islands, but motherhood is not a time to be an island. The moment you're pregnant, man, make some friends. Get so on your side.
That is so true. And what you said about educating him is so valuable, because whenever I was, I wanted a home birth, and my husband was like, are you insane? Like, you almost bled to death of the last baby. Like, why would you want to do this? And I was like, this is precisely why. Because I was in the hospital and I was rushing there and everything was nuts. And I was so stressed and everything like that. Versus like, something is telling me that if I can be at home, I can be more relaxed. I can be more calm and confident. And I didn't have to convince him, because at that point in our marriage, he was pretty much like, this is your wheelhouse. Like, just try not to die, basically. And I will support you in whatever. And I mean that in like a nice way. And so we met with a home birth midwife, and she spent so much time with us. And it was just amazing, because it wasn't like she was educating, like, this is how the baby's going to come down and do the twist and all this stuff. Like, no, it was more of like, if this situation happens, then we will do this. If this happens, then we can do this. And it appealed to that like more logical side of his mind and the protector side of him, to be like, okay, even if things happen, there's plans. That's really what he wanted to know. And that's what I would say to like any woman who's really wanting this. Like, men and women are different. We think differently. So you can't necessarily appeal to the feeling side of him, because he's just not going to get it. So it has to really be like that logic side of it. Right. And to piggyback off of the hospital, if you are going to have people there, or if you are going to give birth in the hospital, 1,000%, you need an advocate, at least one. And another thing is that the birth plans, they look pretty, but they don't actually do anything, because most of the time they get set on the counter and that's that. So what I do is I actually recommend this hospital consent form that I have. And it's something you take into your doctors before you have the baby, and you literally go through with it, where it's like you initial or sign what you consent to and what you would need more information on before consenting to. And it's just, so much better because, again, it makes them really know what you want. And it also holds their feet to the fire because they're signing this as well. So it's
Right.
almost like this agreement between you two. And so I just
Right.
wanted to throw that out there.
I think another thing that would be really helpful is if they would make accessible to us the protocols
Oh, yeah, for sure.
so that when we walk in there and it's like, okay, you're having a premature baby, here are the protocols. Here's what your insurance will cover and won't cover. Here are the timelines and expectations. Because if we have a sense, and here are all the different drugs, and here's the usual course, and here are the side effects. I mean, if you have, it would be an encyclopedia, honestly. But if you had that information going in, it's no longer bells and whistles and what to expect when you're expecting.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. It's not a fairy tale. They treat you like an emergency procedure. And they are, like you said, it's crazy. It's chaotic. A lot of people are coming and going. I had like all the doctors in my practice rotate through in the 4 days I was there.
Yeah.
So I never had one doctor. It was just crazy. And so best to be prepared. And I know it's unnerving, but it's not like planning a wedding.
Yeah.
This is having a baby. This is bringing life into the world. And I think for me, it was the biggest wake up, grow up call I've ever had in my life. Like, you're a mother now, and you need to stop, get out of la la land and get into the real world. You're dealing with God right now, that creation. And I never felt more ready and more unprepared.
I can agree with that too. Yeah.
I was so in awe that God and I were working like this. And it is one of my earliest lessons of how God works with us, but he's in charge, and how he gives us a lot of responsibility, and we really screw it up. And it's a great test. I wish I would have had stronger faith when I had both my children. I think it would have been a little bit of a different journey, because I was definitely in survivor mode. And that's never a good place to go into something as powerful as creating and bringing life into this world. I think you need to be in faith mode, in very practical mode, and serious. This is life and death, and every choice you make makes a difference. So, get ready. It's an initiation, really.
It really is. And one thing that in your book you wrote is that something along the lines of like, I may not want another baby, but I need one. And this I find so funny, because one of my, the woman who I trained to become a traditional birth companion with, she has 7 children. And she said it took until number 7 before she finally like released the control to God. And so she was like, and I probably would never have done that if I hadn't had to do that because of these children.
Right.
And so that's something that like really stuck out to me, is like, because I feel like that too, where it's like, obviously I want my children, but like I needed them in order to get me to where I am now.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's so beautiful. And sometimes we forget like that it is this journey, and that even though sometimes having another child is really hard, not just the childbirth, but the childhood and raising the child, but it's something that is going to really transform you.
Yeah. I think my son really needed us to have the second child too. I can't even imagine the world without my daughter, Josephine. She's such a light and such a gift. He was so hard. He was the difficult baby because of the 9 years. We couldn't figure out why we didn't know he couldn't see. We just knew he was super angry and explosive and slow on the developmental curve. I just didn't know what was wrong with him until we knew what was wrong with him. Whereas she just came in kind of totally chill, like a little angel on a cloud, and she weighed like 9 pounds, and she was totally on time. In fact, she was late, and she slept through the first night and never stopped sleeping. And she was just so easy. And I was like, thank gosh, that I had this second baby so I could actually have a non-traumatic experience,
Yeah.
right? Just a good birth. And she seemed to really bring me into a kind of full, whole sense of what this was, that it didn't have to all be really, really hard, but it could also be this other thing. And now it's interesting, they flipped. She's extraordinarily hard now. She's 23. It really started when she was about 17 and just recently has come out of it. But my son has just been an absolute joy, you know, all through his adulthood and, you know, end of his teens. So it's so crazy how they flip, and they've created a whole picture, a whole experience, I guess you could call it, a whole experience of wisdom and insight. And they just continue to teach me every single day.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just because I'm curious, how, you don't need to go into like identifying specifics or anything like that, but like, how did you find out about your son's eyes? Because I feel like that's such a unique diagnosis, I guess, is what you would say.
Actually, it's extremely common for
Oh,
premature babies. They just don't let you know. Something's off. In fact, I was sitting in church just a couple days ago, Saturday night, next to this wonderfully elderly woman I love, who I always sit next to do rosary with. And she's the caller for the rosary. And we just kind of sit next to each other. And we were talking about my son who's becoming a priest. And she was saying, "Aren't you so proud? Isn't that wonderful?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am. It's amazing because of his struggles." Anyways, we started talking about the struggles, and she asked immediately, was he premature? I hadn't even told her that. So I said, "Well, what's going on?" And her grandson is 15 and was premature, and he has almost similar qualities that I was explaining about the earlier challenges with my son, which is he has learning disabilities, he has this explosive rage, he has these things, he's not on track, maybe on the spectrum a little bit. And so I explained to her what was going on, and it was head trauma. And it took
so interesting.
age 9, through a series of intuitive kind of searchings, I took him to this guy who was a Catholic shaman. I don't know if you've ever heard of something like that, but he was kind of a shaman guy who was also Catholic. And he was like, he did body work, and he was just looking at Spencer, and I was explaining his learning problems, and he was looking at him, and he said, "I'm going to send you to this optometrist I know who's really good." He goes, "There's something going on with the eyes." So, okay, shaman guy. And off we went. I think he maybe channels the Holy Spirit through crystals or something. Okay, that's very Portland. And so off we went to this optometrist, and the optometrist actually did an eye exam, and he really looked closely at him, and he said, I think what's going on is that he has had some kind of head trauma. And I can see it in the way that his muscles are holding the eyes, holding really tight. So he's really overworking in the way he sees. That's usually a response to some form of trauma. And then he asked, was he born premature? That's the first time the lights went off in my head. Yes. How was he treated when he was born premature? Well, here's what the protocols that they did. He goes, "Okay, I'm going to send you over to this other specialist who is an expert in head trauma, car accidents." And so I took my boy over there, and they put a set of goggles on him, and they tracked his eyes and how they were tracking how they see. And it turned out that objects were 6 to 8 inches outside of his field of vision. So he was like, a ball would be thrown and he'd see it here, but it went, it hit him in the head. So he'd always see things outside of where they actually were. You imagine how hard that would be to read, to do math, to play music. I mean, we were just noticing this, and they even told us at the school, he can't learn. There's something wrong with him, but he's incredibly bright, and he understands really interesting metaphorical concepts and symbols. So anyway, this expert put these goggles on him, and he showed us And my husband just kind of sat down, because up to that point, my husband was saying, we just have to push him harder. We just need to get tutors. We need to make him learn. And I'm like, no, something is wrong. Something is wrong at a structural level. And then he showed us, and my husband just sat down. And I think that was the last time he argued about anything with me. And he put these glasses on Spence that actually relaxed his muscles.
Interesting.
In the eyes. And he said, Mom, everything's settled down.
Oh.
Everything around. And I just started crying then. So both of us are crying at this point. And he said, so what he's been doing is trying to control the objects, the damage to the optical nerves. When there's a head trauma, the first place that gets hurt is the optical nerves. Now, how could a premature baby have head trauma? Well, the first thing they did was put a catheter into his skull.
Yep.
That's the very first thing. That's standard procedure. And also not even maybe the head trauma from the way he was pulled out, because they're screaming at me to push, 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 and they're pulling him out. So was his head knocked around at that point, right? And then they grab him and race him out of the room. Is he knocked around at that point?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there you go. It's just one darn thing after another. And so we had to spend the next year doing physical therapy to restore his eyes. And then he finally started, he was way behind in school and had to catch up. And he was socially way behind as well. And then most recently, over the last year or 2 years, he's done something called neurofeedback. And I actually recommended that to the grandmother who I do rosary with. And I said, I would just start with neurofeedback for a head trauma now versus the physical therapy to restore the eyes.
Yeah.
From what I learned. Because neurofeedback has to do with head traumas, and it has to do with the way our brains react to head traumas or any kind of trauma, which is close down the right hemisphere and overwork the left hemisphere. So even though Spencer was able to restore his vision and able to catch up and start learning, he still had the head trauma that we hadn't dealt with. So if you have any mothers out there who are looking at their kids and they're seeing developmental delays, they're seeing explosive rage, they're seeing head butting or head hitting, it's potentially from something happening that's messed up in the head. And again, I love neurofeedback. The trick with neurofeedback is because it actually works, it's not often covered by insurance. They'll often go for a pharmaceutical solution. So you have to work really hard to find a good practitioner. And I'm more than happy to share with you a link for somebody
awesome.
who's extraordinary. I vetted her, and Spencer went and saw her, and the rest of the work got done. And he's obviously a great kid, but he has not been without his struggles his whole life as a result of this. The man who actually helped him with and put the goggles on him and then put the glasses on him told me it's common for this to happen with kids, and usually they don't make it. They'll end up trying to take their life by age 15, 16. Wow. They will grow out of it, but there is a suicidal quality. And I have to wonder about the over-aggressive birth techniques that take place in this country and the percentage of those babies born premature, especially boys, who end up killing themselves or attempting suicide, because those numbers are startling. We've heard about them, especially over COVID, but prior to that, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just saying, look, there's got to be something going on.
Yeah.
I mean, we as mothers can be vigilant. We can work as hard as we can to make sure our kids get the care that they need, but we still live in this society, and the society has its blind spots. Yeah. Hopefully we're in a revolution right now. Hopefully this will all change. I hope. But I feel so, maybe that's another reason I reached out to you, Bridget, is because I just thought it's not changed at all. Yeah. And, it's so hard to do this mighty work. We really need to pull together and share resources and encourage one another.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And it's so interesting how, yet again, you trusted your intuition. And just to think, if you hadn't advocated for your son, what potentially could have been.
It's weird. Like the birth almost set me up to be a warrior every step of the way.
That is so true. So true.
Because now I had the courage to stomp into schools and demand that he get an IEP and demand that they pay attention to him and argue and advocate for him. I had so many teachers say, he asks too many questions. He wants to have too much dialogue. And I'm like, that's what you're supposed to do. You're a teacher. You're supposed to teach and answer questions. And they didn't like me and they were so happy to see the back of me. But darn it.
Yeah.
It's my job. Can't advocate for himself. I have to stand up for him, fight for him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true. And again, just so beautiful how you did do that. And it really is true that it's like your birth sets you up for your motherhood. So it's really important that you take that birth seriously, because if you don't, then you have a whole bunch of other stuff to work through before you even can really get into like all the stuff that you're going to have in motherhood.
Yeah.
And
every birth is different. I mean, the birth with my daughter was so different than the birth with my son. Yeah. And it also did become a template for how we would be for the rest of our lives. It's interesting when you say that, because that's true. Watch out, because you're laying down the track for how it's going to go. And every child is different.
Yeah. And so in the book, you also mentioned like postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, I guess. So did you personally suffer with those?
Both. Yeah, both times. It was awful.
Where do you think that stemmed from?
Based on what I understand now, all those years later, I do believe in the idea that once you lose that placenta, you're losing the heroin equivalent, a high. There's a high that's happening with the placenta and everything, all those hormones pumping through your body, and having that removed from your body often very abruptly. There's no time to really kind of channel and make a break. You have to recalibrate, but you don't get a lot of time to recalibrate because now it's breastfeeding. Yeah. And now it's up 2 or 3 times a night. As it was with Spence, I was told by the doctors, feed him every 3 hours, wake him up and feed him every 3 hours, which is ridiculous. And I shouldn't have done it. It's the most ridiculous advice I've ever heard. But I did it because I was a new mom and I just did whatever the doctors told me out of terror and fear. And he was kind of skinny, so I want to perk him up. But that was also setting me up to never let him get his sleep, and therefore I would never get to sleep, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a combination of things. I think we're not really acclimated to the loss of all those hormones and the loss of the placenta and just the loss of the good feelings we've been carrying around. And we need that transitional period to recalibrate and get on track again. For Spencer, I don't think it was as hard because I fell furiously into breastfeeding, which was a real challenge for me. I just didn't have the hardware to do it very well at first. Yeah. I got there, but it took a while. So the depression was mostly when the sun went down. There was something about when it's daylight, I'm okay. But as soon as it gets dark, it's like some darkness in me rose. Yeah. All of my kind of vigilance and hard work and focus on doing the job kind of crept back in the shadows. And then I think the evil one kind of took advantage of it. It was like, let me tell you all the bad stuff that you've done, how badly you're screwing this up, and how you're never going to get this right. I mean, I think he loves those opportunities. And I think a great faith would have helped me understand the darkness is coming upon me. Yeah. And I don't have good weapons to fight back. That's why being a Christian woman is a good thing. Get your deliverance prayers out. Take Satan seriously, as he hates mothers. He hates motherhood. Yeah. He's all up in our business. And you're not going to logic your way out of his arguments because he's going to go for all the jugular of your greatest fears. And now I hadn't even thought of that, Bridget, until this very moment. The Holy Spirit maybe is giving me this, but yeah, be armed. There's some really great deliverance prayers. There's another book also called, I'll give it to you. I don't know it right away. It's a book on spiritual warfare, I think by Gallagher, terrific. You might have heard of it, about spiritual warfare.
Huh.
It's a really good book, but you're either playing on one team or the other all the time in every decision you make. You're either praying for God or you're
Yeah.
playing being played by Satan. And I think as a mother, never is that more true. I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
Mary's there to fight him, and he hates Mary. He just wants nothing to do with women and mothers and motherhood. And yeah, I think he makes things really hard. Those witching hours when the sun went down were brutal. And usually I'd be up at 2 or 3 in the morning for never get any sleep. And it was even worse. So what
Yeah.
would I say about postpartum depression? One, make sure you get enough sleep so you can recalibrate, eat really, really well, keep enough, fuel and good fuel in your body so you have enough milk, and then don't give up on your prayers.
Yeah.
Call for help because you're going to need it. Yeah.
And one thing too that my one mentor always like drove home is that well, first off, a lot of times whenever women have or experience postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum rage, anything really, and I'm speaking from personal experience because I definitely had postpartum rage after my second baby, and it felt like something was wrong with like that I was bad and I was doing something wrong, when in reality it's like what she would tell us is that the woman is acting in a reasonable way due to an unreasonable situation. And I just love that so much because so many of us take on this this identity of like we've done something bad because we have this like anxiety, because we have this depression, when in reality it doesn't say anything about us. Our behaviors, our reactions are reasonable in this environment, in this situation that
Right.
might not be supporting us in the way that we need to be supported. So
Right.
especially initially postpartum, like with my number two, I was up literally, I went to the zoo when he was like 2 weeks old and after I had a massive surgery, transfusion and everything. And looking back, I'm like, why in the world? Why did I do that? But
Right.
at that time, it was like, well, because my husband had a work trip at the zoo and like they invited me. So I felt like I had to go because if
Right.
I didn't, then it like makes me look like a bad wife. And when in reality, it's like, no, I should have been home sleeping and like resting. And not
Right.
to say that isolated instance like caused the rage or anything, but those like multiple times of those happening does really affect how you feel and like what it is that you do. So I think it's just important to remember like to be kind to ourselves and to really take that time to rest after we have babies, and even just throughout the day, even when our babies are older, like to take the time to rest and like to recoup and recalibrate our minds and to spend time with God and just like ask for help and assistance, because ultimately the way that we are feeling is God's way of trying to show us how healthy, I'm not going to say healthy, but you know what I mean? Like how well we are doing
Right.
as a whole person.
Well, I think postpartum is a very intense thing, and people start to feel just completely like they're losing their mind. How long did it take for you to come out of it?
About almost 2 years.
Wow.
But that was simply because I thought something was wrong with me. And so I knew that I needed to get help. But whenever I would like Google search, like feeling funny after baby, like therapy, do I need therapy? I got to these pages and it was like all the websites just made it feel like something was wrong, like that I was the problem.
Right.
When in reality, it was like, obviously I had something wrong with me, but it wasn't me. It was like I needed help recalibrating my whole situation. And
Yeah.
so I eventually did find somebody to help me, but she took it in a very different way, which is what I do, where it's not you that's the problem. Like you are reacting to the situation in a reasonable way. And now we just need to heal those parts of you through Jesus so that you can see it in a different light moving forward.
That's good. That's good. This is the whole dimension I just didn't have. I was very connected into the spiritual community, but it was more like Eastern
Mm-hmm.
philosophy, right? And
Yeah.
then kind of healing community. I was doing a lot of alternative stuff, but and by the time I had my second child, 4 years had passed. So I was also, by then my book was a big New York Times bestseller. Not this book, my first book, and I had a lot of money, and I could also, kind of surround myself with comforts that in the first time
Yeah.
I was striving to be a published writer when I wrote my first book while I was pregnant with Spencer, and then his first year of life, I wrote it and got it published. So by the time Josephine came around, and I wasn't going to go through any of that, I told myself, I'm not going to go through that again. I'm going to make this different, right? Well, it was its own thing, but I did insist on. My husband brought me breakfast from his place every single morning, so I did not lose my milk, right? I was
Yeah.
like, go to the place, get me this French toast and this bacon, and or make breakfast. He was on duty to make breakfast. And we slept separate so that I could get the sleep that I needed. I slept with the baby and he slept with Spence, so I was able to restore faster.
Yeah.
But I still got those demons in the evening. They still
Yeah.
came in, and I
Well,
think it was personal.
yeah, and some of that too is just, again, the evil one hates motherhood, hates
That's
women, and hates holiness. So motherhood is very sanctifying, and so
yeah.
therefore he really wanted you.
Yeah, he's after me. And I was giving in, obviously.
So
Yeah.
many of us do, unfortunately. And that's like one of the last things that I wrote down about from your book is that it was at like one of the last few pages where you were like started to sort through the stuff in the drawers, and that you figured that's what did it say? I figured that's the way it was with kids. They were here to dig into places we didn't want to see. They were here to force us to clean up the mess. And when I read that, I was like, ugh, that's so true. It's so annoying, but it's so true.
My son still does that. He just
Yeah.
comes in and he takes everything that I've gotten all sorted out and figured out, and he just upends the drawers and it's all over the floor. And you're like, oh, God, I just fixed that. But that's really a perfect metaphor because they are the next generation. And, it's our job to do our work, to know ourselves as fully as possible. There's that quote at the beginning of the book. Jung says this, that children are destined to either fulfill our unfulfilled dreams or have their own destiny, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually a heartbreaking. Children are driven unconsciously in a direction that is intended to compensate for everything that was left unfulfilled
Yeah.
in the life of their parents. And that's a heartbreaking thing to read, because the question then becomes, what's unfulfilled in me? So that I can free my child, both my children, all my children. You have 5 and the other woman has 7, and how many others? What can I do to free myself that they can all be free to realize their own destiny? What work can I do in this life as fast as possible while also respecting my obligations and my station in life? What can I do to really be honest, to tell the truth about myself, and to get the help I need, and good help that really makes a difference? I have one thing. If you don't notice change with anybody you're seeing within 3 times, move on. There are plenty of people out there, and there isn't a lot of time. Don't waste a year, 2 years in therapy with the wrong person.
Yeah.
Get the help that makes practical sense and keep going, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what our kids need from us. They need us to awaken, and it's a lifetime process. So
Yeah, for sure. And that's something too that I pray every single day, night, all the time, is that, like in regard to that quote, is that like, I know I'm creating cracks and bruises and like messing up my kids. Unfortunately, I just know that because I am a human who's making mistakes.
right.
But I just pray that even though I am doing that, like, this is how I think of it, that Mary is just coming around and like putting little roses and like little beautiful flowers on all of those little cracks. So that even though like my daughter's 9 or almost 9, even though like I might have like created this big crack that could eventually become something major. Like I have to believe that that because of the work that I've done on myself and how I'm trying to be, that, and like asking Mother Mary to help, that she is going to go around and like maybe not make it perfect, but at least create something beautiful out of it.
Right. God draws straight with our crooked lines.
Yes.
And it all can't be easy. Our kids can't have an easy life. We want them to have the easy life. We want to put water wings all around them on every limb, but they have to struggle, and we have to fall, and we have to say, I'm sorry. We have to say, we're in it together. You know, we have to show them that. And I think that's the reason why my kids are actually okay after everything. I mean, they've been through a lot with me, and because I had so much trauma in my own life and it took a long time to heal. But I've always been like, I never got an owner's manual with either one of you. I have no idea how you, Spencer, operate, or you, Joe, operate. My daughter's Josephine. I don't know. You're going to have to help me. We're going to have to work together. And yeah, I'm going to screw it up. But hopefully there's a lot of grace and you'll forgive me. And children are incredibly forgiving as long as they know they're being dealt with practically and reasonably and in ways that they can relate to. And I think I've done more good than I've done harm. I hope. And they seem like really good people because I'm still that way. I mean, my son is doing therapy now for his formation. And he's like, okay, we need to talk about this thing. And he's 12. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to hear it.
The fact that he feels comfortable enough to talk with you about that is huge.
I know. And I'm just like, okay, I don't want to hear it, but let's go. Whatever I did then, I'm so sorry. And then we talk it through, because a part of you just cringes to have to go back and have to justify.
Yeah.
But really, they don't want you to justify. They just want you to hear them, how they perceived, and say, you're right. And I'm sorry. Here's what I was thinking at the time. But honestly, that must have sucked, you know, you. And then there's this beautiful thing that happens, right? Every step of the way, I can't get over how humbling it is to be a mother. Nothing has been more humbling. Like on my knees, humbled. I do not know what I'm doing. God, help me not screw these beautiful creatures up that you have gifted me with. And I'm so grateful for that humility. That turns out to be the essence of our faith.
Yeah. It's like so beautiful and so hard at the same time.
So beautiful and so hard. When they came, I thought, I'm going to show them the world. I'm going to show them how everything works. I'm going to teach them all that I've learned. And I realized, no, you're not. Every step of the way. And your job is to be nimble and responsive and humble and grateful.
Yeah, that's so good. And so as one of my last questions before we wrap up is, what's the most important piece of wisdom you'd share with the discerning mother?
That's impossible, Bridget. Well, from the place where I'm at now with a 27-year-old and a 23-year-old, I'm going to tear up. Figure out a way to slow down. Figure out a way to be as present as possible to every tiny, beautiful moment, even the ones that are awful when you're up in the middle of the night and they're puking all over you. Because one day it's over. You're going to miss it. You're going to miss it so much. The hugs, the socks on the floor, the messes they make, the arguments, the meals. You're going to miss it. Don't waste a second of it, because when it's done, it's done. And you never get it back.
That's so good. And I know it is really hard when you're in the moments.
The mess of it.
But like trying to be more present. Like today I gave my kids each a hug for like 20 seconds or so. And they were like, Mommy, what are you doing?
I know, they're already pushing away.
I was like, I'm just giving you a hug. And they're like, okay, why? And, but no, that's such good advice. Even though it's so hard to like heed that advice, it's such good advice.
And I never would have heeded it when I was a young mother. I would be just like, excuse me, the clock just went backwards. Are you kidding me? Like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But oh, I can't tell you how much I miss my children.
Yeah.
I just miss their hugs. I miss being in their lives every day. I miss seeing them when we wake up. I miss hearing about them when they come back at the end of the day. I just miss them. They're flying into their lives. The world is taking them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm there, but I'm so peripheral now. And of course, when problems happen, my daughter is obviously on the phone and, Mom, I need you and I want you. And, she really wants what she wants and he wants what he wants. And those are great moments, but they don't replace the daily grind of it.
Yeah.
And I wish somebody would have taken me by the shoulders and held my face and said, sweetheart, one day all of this will be gone. I think I would have sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because I loved it and hated it so much at the same time.
Where I am right now, I'm like, oh.
I just hate it. I hate it. It's so hard, but I loved it too. It was so good. I felt so alive and so essential and so necessary.
Yeah.
And it was such important work. It's the most important work you'll ever do. To be a mother. You're the ground, matter. You're the ground from which they grow from. It's essential, vital, beautiful work that cannot be reduced to a Hallmark card or a holiday. It's the most important work a person can ever do, and so devalued in our culture. We're told we're supposed to work and we're supposed to do this and we're supposed to achieve that and we're supposed to be that. No, be a mom. And that's mighty, mighty work, and enjoy every second you possibly can, because when it's done, it's done.
All right. Well, that could have been a podcast all on its own. Maybe I'll make that a second clip so I can just hear that over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah. I was watching these mothers at this church. My son dragged me to this church to help him evangelize one of his buddies. I was like, I don't want to evangelize your friend. So we went, and it was a church full of families. And there was a family right in the pew in front of us. A woman had like 5 children, and they were all on her from the 12-year-old to the baby. And I was like, oh, I forgot the physicality of it. Just that your body is their body. They're all over you. Yeah, I just forgot that. Like you forget it. It's so intense. Those years are so intense. But you just have to do some yoga or whatever you need to do to enjoy it. Learn some good breathing techniques and centering techniques, because it really is quite delicious as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so where can people find you, read your books? Like, tell us how to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, you can find me at www.blackbirdpdx.com. And that's my primary website, so you can reach me there.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. This was so wonderful talking with you and just hearing your wisdom. And again, thank you for sending me this book. It was so good.
Oh, Show Me the Way is just this little quiet book off in the corner. So I'm so glad you loved it, Bridget. Yay.
Yeah, it was so good. Thanks so much. This was such a good episode. This was so great. Just so much wisdom in here.
Thank you. It was an honor. It was an honor. I hope it's helpful.
For sure.